Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our presentation of several excerpts from Jonathan Bayliss's novel, Prologos. This is what it looks like if you haven't seen it. It's quite massive. It's over 1,000 pages long. It's the longest of his 4 novels, and it includes some of his most difficult passages, but it also includes, I think, some of his most reader-friendly passages, such as the chapter titled The Book of Ruth, which one of our reading groups is currently working its way through. And at the very back of the book, Bayliss lays out several different ways of moving through this long novel. He's got an index, what he calls an index. I don't know if you can see this, but this is what he calls a curriculum that includes only some of the chapters, and there's another long curriculum here. And then if you go to this section called Syllabus for the Side Adjacent, this is just the Chapman family's trip from Oakland to the San Francisco Zoo and then back home to Oakland, all on public transportation, mom, dad, 3 young boys. So a kind of an epic journey for the Chapman family. It's a good way to introduce yourself to Bayliss if you just read those chapters. So, okay. The passages we'll be reading today are drawn from these chapters, and they describe the family's encounters at the zoo with chickens, cows, a black panther, and a monkey. In our first passage, the family visits the zoo's chicken enclosure. The managers of the zoo, Bayliss tells us, believe that for city dwellers, barnyard animals are as exotic as jungle animals. Family's 3 children are Jonathan, Matthew, and Roger. Jonathan seems to be around 10 or 12 years old, Matthew maybe 6 or 8, and Roger maybe 2 years old. He's in a stroller for most of the trip. In addition to the family's comments on the enclosure's rooster, the passage I'm about to read also includes a short discussion between Michael and his wife on the fragility of the male ego. The fragile male ego is exemplified in the rooster, a Rhode Island red, who, as the family approaches, tries to crow, but what he produces is what Bayliss calls a harshly broken, throat-swallowed crow. And the hens simply ignore him, and the rooster looks embarrassed. So Matthew, the middle child, says or asks, doesn't he know how to sing? And his older brother Jonathan teases the rooster. The chicken tried to crow, but couldn't crow because deedle-dee-dee diddle-dum did. Then the mom says to Matthew, roosters can't sing. And then she turns to her husband and says, isn't that right, sir? And then to her boy Matthew and says, he was trying to crow. So the father, Michael, says, cocks aren't usually allowed in the city. They disturb the peace. Maybe this one has a speech impediment. His wife Ruth says, but Michael, what's the matter with him? He's a beautiful man, but the hens don't pay any attention to him. And Michael replies, it's the same problem I have. They don't recognize a master's voice. That was his swan song, and now he's gone inside to die. Maybe it's the first time he ever tried to crow in the middle of the day. And Ruth picks up on this. She says it didn't work, and now he expects the sun to drop out of the sky and the world to turn black. Poor rooster. But why don't the chickens look up when he... And Michael interrupts her. He says, call him a cock, he says. That's what he is, a cock. All fowls are roosters. Even hens roost. Michael's a little pedantic, if you can't guess. Then Jonathan, the oldest of the 3 boys, pipes up. He says, I think he wants the sun to go down if that will get rid of the stupid people watching him all day long. Let's go. I want to see the elephants. Okay. The father acknowledges the son's demand, even joining him in it, but puts him off all with the same gesture, which waves him down with a flapping hand held high on bended wrist near the chin, while still facing away at the mother. And Michael says to his wife, Madam, he's depressed from being jeered at for believing that he conjures up the sun in the morning. But humiliation and ignorant ingratitude won't make him change his ways. It's his thankless duty to earn the whole barnyard keep by acting like a dandy barnyard coxcomb while he's actually only making the earth turn. And Ruth starts laughing and she says, not with his voice. And she's hanging on her husband's arm. So that's our first passage. That's the house of the chickens, and I'm going to turn it over to John.
Okay, but yes, welcome everyone. So the family next stop is the cowshed. And Bayliss imagines events from the perspective of the cow, specifically that of one of the cows, Delilah, who takes a special interest in Roger, the youngest son, for reasons Bayliss speculates about towards the end of the passage. But first it remained to visit the bovines, and he was obliged to admit that they were important. The Chapman entourage passed along the outside of a cowshed, contrived for the public with hinged shutters dropped down to make an open window above the mangers and the personal water troughs of the Guernsey sisters, who now stood in their stanchions, prepared for the best part of the day, like housewives chewing their cuds on a club holiday, free of their own children, but equally attentive to the children in the parade now passing before their inn. Roger, in particular, whom they craned their necks to see, not to gush over him, but simply to take in the perfection of his species. He hadn't anything to give them to eat, but it was so obvious he was sorry for his parents' neglect to provide him that they nodded to his mother in approval of his manners as they sympathetically accepted his shy caresses, held up by his father to reach their moist, dark muzzles. The fragrant hay and sweet breath penetrated even to the man's affections, that's to the dad's affections. From considerable endurance of the public, these cows had become judges of humanity, most of whom they ignored as placidly as possible. But they were taken by this golden-haired little one who came up from wheels, especially Delilah, according to the posted name on the barn, who looked long after him, and he back at her, the one whose maternity had been most recently exploited, whose aching milk leaked to the straw-strewn boards, who had not yet forgotten what every cow must forget a dozen times in her life, the lost cause of her freshening. Roger was unable to console her, but he learned her word. "Co, co," he repeated with long, round O's.
All right. Finally, the family gets to the more exotic animals as they enter the house of the big cats. Back in 1988, I was visiting the zoo in Berlin, Germany, on a cold, overcast, late winter day, and I happened to wander into the house of the big cats just before feeding time. I don't know if the keeper was a little bit late with dinner on this particular day, but all of the cats, lions, tigers, leopards, jaguars, started to roar. They were hungry. They knew it was dinner time, and this place was mostly concrete, so the sound of their roaring seemed to echo or reverberate, and I had never heard anything like it. Primeval and overwhelming. All right, back to Bayliss. The oldest of the three boys, Jonathan, has been reading Rudyard Kipling's great novel, The Jungle Book. And as a result, he has developed a very strong interest in Black Panthers. You may recall that in The Jungle Book, the Black Panther Bagheera, his name Bagheera is the Hindi word for leopard or panther, is a very important character, both mentor and protector of the boy Mowgli. So when Jonathan sees the zoo's Black Panther, he is absolutely entranced. Also, in his imagination, he has created a kind of perfect hybrid big cat made up of the best features of lions, tigers, and panthers. And Bayliss will describe this super cat that Jonathan has imagined. So here's the passage. Jonathan's interest in lions was limited to the tall kings of the race, for the noble proportion of forequarters to rakish hindquarters, for their special contribution to the ideal, this is Jonathan's ideal imaginary big cat, the ideal which as a whole they suffered by comparison to. Catalogued in his mind's bestiary was a lion-size hybrid from India, Africa, and America. A mountain climbing, ocean diving, yardarm walking, wall leaping, road speeding, night watching, day purring bodyguard and traveling companion, politer than a collie in gentle society, and keener than a bloodhound in trailing the lost or the fleeing. His young master's best friend. But something more shapely than the high-hipped African female was required in the pedigree. Something of the burning bright tiger's length, perhaps Siberian, for sinuous lines and independent power. So Jonathan asks his parents, he's thinking about this super hybrid, why don't they let a mother tiger and a father lion get married? And his mom says, it must have been tried. If anything had come of it, I think we would have heard. Okay, if you've ever seen a leopard or a black panther, either at a zoo or in the wild, or even if you've only seen one on a good nature documentary, I want you to try to remember what they're like, because young Jonathan is about to see his first one face to face, and this cat is absolutely magnificent. Okay, here's the Bayliss's description. Third cage among the leopards, there he was. Suddenly, without conviction, Jonathan was stock still in front of a flowing silhouette, more majestically black than the panther of his dream. Pure as snow, sole father and form maker to the son of the marvelously epigenetic cat mother envisioned, potential progenitor of the supernal and insuperable scion, himself already perfect, in golden eye and silky chin and lengthened jaw, in courtesy, in silent tread and calligraphic tail, in repose and liquid motion, as paradoxical as a boomerang arrow, unpredictable, even in his restless pacing of a small box with 3 walls. Nothing static or arrestable in his movement, wholly beyond the scope of photography and altogether outrivaling other cats in his mercurial specific gravity as a masterwork of quick power in the liquefied cohesion of finely formed parts. A slim, almost unwatchable black shadow, or indeterminable black quantum that could not be fixed, a black ghost that a boy's hands might be expected to pass through airily if in the yearning of his bowels he had been permitted to reach out for its love. But really, a hot, muscular shade, easily enlarged by changes in the slant of the sun. That was all one sentence. Jonathan exulted at the placard namesaking this hero Bagheera. So the zoo has named this particular panther Bagheera. Jonathan loves that. His animosity toward the trustees of the zoo dissolved in the warmth of literary sympathy. In his pleasure at the convergence of official imagination with his own, he forgot for a moment the cruelties of public imprisonment. In his trembling delight at the mirror of existence. And as he stares at the panther, Jonathan recalls the scene in the Jungle Book when the boy Mowgli is about to leave the jungle forever and join the human world. And Mowgli has to fight back tears as he says goodbye to his friend Bagheera. And Bagheera replies, "We be of one blood, thou and I. Remember, Bagheera loved thee." Which would be the absolutely greatest thing possible for a 10-year-old boy to be told by a black panther. You and I are of one blood. Okay, back to the novel. Bayliss writes, the dream seemed real before him. A true black sub-Asian, only slightly smaller than a tiger after all. Its delicate, sagacious head categorically distinguished from the thuggish or complacent countenances of other Felidae, the zoological name of the cat family. If he was a mite low in the shoulders, it was a small matter of taste, which could be corrected in a high-bred Melanesian son, Melanesian referring to melanin, which is the substance that gives this animal its black fur. Bagheera was a recent acquisition, still unused to confinement, still soundlessly snarling as he prowled his cage, still thinking swiftly behind slowly blinking green-gold eyes, still revolving policy. The other cats beyond his walls seemed aware that their prince was now among them, fearfully preparing themselves to obey his command when he chose to lead the terrible escape, Yet this was no blusterer. His voice was too soft and ironic for any human ear that didn't come as close as a boy's would, who lies against his side, stroking and hugging the godlike neck, as black and smooth as the glossy coat of miniature Semiramis. This Semiramis is the Chapman's family cat, a black cat that they have named after the ancient Assyrian queen. But alas, according to a shock of science, not so immaculate. It was only now, in humbled pride, that Jonathan began to learn something new from his visit to the cat house, and his father, teaching him, would presently share yet another surprise. In the trance of discourse, they both abstracted themselves from the blossoming, buzzing confusion of human nature, and to the man supplying knowledge, the boy's feelings were as his own. Jonathan asks his father, "Dad, why did they stick him over here with the leopards? He should be with the lions and tigers." And Michael answers, "Because he's a black leopard." And the boy says, "He is not. He's a black panther." And the father says, "Read the sign, Jono. The black panther is not a species." And then Michael thinks to himself for a bit. He doesn't say this out loud. The French naturalist Buffon, who started by following the philosophers, came around to declare that the only real category is the species, his empirical proof being the sterility of hybrids, a remarkable case of science in support of idiom. On this point, Michael's not entirely correct. Most hybrids are sterile, but some hybrids, produced, for example, by lions mating with tigers, or wolves mating with dogs or coyotes, or Homo sapiens mating with Neanderthal, are fertile. Michael continues thinking to himself, the Black Panther therefore exists only as a spurious individual. There was no Black Panther in Noah's Ark, who rescued only archetypes, whether real or nominal. My boy's plan won't work. You can go only one generation down with the miscegenation of animals. His increase makes a species, not just fucking fun without responsibility. Then he breaks off this line of thought. He returns to his son, and he says, he's a leopard that's changed his spots. If you got up very close, you could still see them, black under black. You didn't read the book carefully enough. This is an individual variation, like a long-haired German shepherd or a white whale. By all odds, none of Bagheera's cubs will be all black. And Jonathan is deeply disappointed by this. He says, you mean he's a leopard just all blotted over? But I know he's a Black Panther. He can't be anything else. And Michael says, don't say just. Black is hard to get. It makes him more distinguished than you think. He has none of the colors on him. Don't be sorry that he doesn't have his own species. Ordinary animals are like their kind. You should be glad he's changed his skin. Besides, don't sneeze at leopards. They can do everything Black Panthers do. Not counting, of course, our unique friend, Bagheera. Leopard from leopard. Leopard, my boy, is a lion panther. And Michael is right. Leo is, of course, Latin for lion. And pardus is Latin, not for panther, but for leopard. So he's not entirely right. And Jonathan says, ha, then what does panther mean, old man? It must mean something. And Michael answers, pshaw, young man. I don't know. Maybe pan, theos, all the gods in one. And this makes Jonathan laugh. The Latin for panther, by the way, is simply panthera. But of course, okay, yeah. I mean, pardus and panthera get mixed up between Latins and panthers because, of course, names and species don't always align neatly, right? In the United States, we have cougars, pumas, mountain lions, panthers, and catamounts, 5 different names for the same species. And there might be others that I'm not even thinking of. So Michael Chapman doesn't know quite as much as he thinks he does, but that's probably true of most of us. And he does a good job of deflecting his son's disappointment that a Black Panther is really only a leopard. All right, John.
Yeah, interestingly, in the next passage, we get another glimpse into Michael's authority or presumed authority on certain things. So from the power and beauty of the great cats, the family moves to the primate house. In a zoo, writes Bayliss, no animal can act natural, least of all monkeys. They leap about ostentatiously in chase of food and misleading inedibles tossed into their cages, and theatrically exploit their very diversity of size and shape. Now, inside the primate house, Michael is apparently overheard by others in the crowd as he attempts to answer his children's questions. And others begin to pepper him with questions as well. At first, he seems to take pride in being regarded as an authority, but his attitude changes as he becomes increasingly uncomfortable, eventually very angry at everyone in his environment, both the caged and the uncaged primates. So this passage, as you'll see, gives us a sense of how the narrative of Prologos and the trip to the zoo even frequently shifts from a straightforward account of the trip to reveal Michael's thoughts and feelings all along the way. And here's one such passage. Michael was soon being peppered with questions about the animals, as if he should know everything about monkeys, lemurs, apes, and men, and could impart his knowledge directly if he only chose to open an ad hoc educational relationship, as if he was expected to serve as an enhancing medium between subject and object. This putative responsibility irritated him. In answering questions or in tracing the boundaries of his ignorance, always too scrupulous of the truth to lay down statements of general import that he was inwardly in doubt of, too conscientious in respect to the general need for truth to be able to slough off the effort like an ordinary member of the Republic. You got me, son. Ask the eggheads. He was worrying himself about accuracy that was beyond his competence, yet reasonable to assume in a paternalistic common reader. He was trapped as he hated to be trapped, forced to stab at specifications and then withdraw them, concerning, for instance, the interhomordial relationship and distinction between knuckle-walking African gorilla chimpanzees and arboreal Asian gibbons orangutans, or a definition of the Bangadar log as a set. He was digging himself deeper and deeper into a hole of exasperation. Nevertheless, as strangers began to listen in, he found himself not unsuperior to the throng, primus inter primates, primate of anthropoetry, primate indeed of all anthropoetics. Yet every word and every minute was another measure deducted from his mortal time. He struggled, snarling with ill temper in the web of familiarity and ignorance that netted him into the community of vulgar amusement, knowing that he should have shut up and kept saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, which wouldn't have helped his kids any, but he started scowling instead of smiling at the brutes on both sides of the fence. So now the anger described in this passage we've just read leads to wide-ranging speculations on Michael's part, which ends as the family comes across one monkey in a cage by itself, walking quickly back and forth from one wall to another, much as the panther was in the earlier passage. The narrator posits the insights and perceptions of the caged primate, who proceeds to show remarkable theatrical talents as well. This pleases the crowd, but drives Michael first to amusement, but then to an idiosyncratic analogy, and finally to hatred and disgust. He's back to the anger, self-hatred, and misanthropy of the previously quoted passage. So here it goes. One morose fellow housed in a private cage within the larger theater patrolled rapidly back and forth on all fours, his idle tail arched behind him, looking at nothing but the bare, short floor ahead. When he came to either end of his shuttle, he whirled toward the inner wall as if making the wrong turn and running out a base hit in order to avoid the sight of human beings who, as travesties of his race, would have sickened him beyond the sickness of his captivity. Such was his wily comic affectation. Matthew Chapman was diddled by the mummery, crying above the din with false insight, "Look, Dad, he's trying to get away from all these people." These words served to cue the outsmarting performer. Pausing only long enough for the unguarded opinion of the child to register in the brain of his public, the canny actor suddenly sprang to a shelf and thence to a bar above, swinging by his tail, mugging and capering to the general laughter. Only the unwilling straight man himself failed to join in, who was as alarmed and confused as any coney-caught dolt, robbed, however, not of his purse, but of his self-respect. And then this unscrupulous exploiter of human, making side-splitting ludicrous grimaces to show gratitude for their laughter, held out his hand for food. Michael and Jonathan, with the rest, had been laughing the laughter that is as involuntary as the response of a man's eye to the presence or image of almost any naked part of a woman's body, even in the very teeth of conviction that he is being used by the woman or by the employer of the woman for some impudent mercenary end, among many possible ends, the least vicious of which is purely carnal. But Michael's smile faded, and his visage darkened with anger when the well-schooled throng clapped at the divertisement. The people applaud like a mindless drill team, punctuating a variety show for the airwaves because clapping was the only courtesy to which they were trained, the only means of expressing everything from scant tolerance to enthusiasm. Michael feared he'd have to bear successive waves of that reflex to art. In hatred and disgust, as fast as he could push his way through the crowd, this Moses led his own tribe from the scene.
Thanks, John. Okay, our final passage today is a little bit shorter than the others, and its focus is not on animals, but on children. It's a somewhat dense passage. This is the one Catherine was talking about earlier. So first, I'm going to paraphrase it. The narrator was going to claim that for adults, all children represent possibility or potential. They represent what might be, what could be, as opposed to what is. A child might grow up to become almost anyone, might go almost anywhere, might do almost anything. Each of us, when we were children, embodied that kind of possibility, although it has slowly diminished with each year that we've grown older. You get to be my age, and there's not much of it left. But even someone as old as I am can be delighted by the possibility present in a child. Bayliss says in this passage that this possibility is something that connects all of us, that makes us human. It's the reason that any adult who happens to notice a particular child out in public feels an immediate affinity or connection with the parent standing next to that child, and with the child, of course. So here's the passage as Bayliss wrote it. If childhood is the mystic medium, joining men and beasts and lilies of the field, so much the more are personal and unique specimens of children, the bond of mankind itself. For in children, as animals understand, the class of man is real, not yet nominal only, seeing that men are man so long as possibilities are open to them. All children, inversely with their age, are in some degree capable of exceeding the species, leading it out of the all too human or destroying it. Yet all are ideally real, therefore universal, transcending the idiosyncrasies of family blood. Any child in any park, unless it's Snivel, is an affinity between its father and any other father or mother or potential father or potential mother, or formerly potential father or formerly potential mother, and between its father and its mother, who are or once were elsewise affined. In the child of any stranger, save to a Nazi, is mankind's mutual gauge, collateral between priests and whores, between those with clean chins and those with beards. A child is one thing a poet can talk to a Republican about. And that concludes our set of readings. We hope you've enjoyed them and that we didn't tax your patience too much.